The logical or assignment operator in JavaScript can be convenient shorthand. You can use it to assign default values, and unlike most other assignment operators, it also short circuits. Let's take a look at how you can use this operator, as well as what this short circuiting actually means. So you've probably worked with other assignment operators in JavaScript. This would be things like the plus equals operator. So if I said something like myVar plus equals 2, this would go and assign the value of myVar to the value of myVar plus 2. You could also rewrite this to be more explicit and say myVar equals myVar plus 2. So that is how other assignment operators are working, and the logical or assignment operator works the same way, except using the logical or operator. So to write one, we would just go and cite myVar and then use the logical or operator and then the equal sign to create a logical or assignment and then the value that we want. In this case, I'm going to just say true to demonstrate how this operator is going to work. Now, when I run this, you can see that myVar has been set to true. If I go back here and put on the right-hand side false instead, you'll see that myVar has been set to false. This all makes sense when we think about the expanded form of these operators. So if I go back here and expand this form here so that we're no longer using the logical or assignment operator, instead we could say myVar equals myVar or false. And because the variable has started as false up here, of course, this is going to evaluate to false as well. If I instead had myVar or true, this would go and evaluate to true because the right-hand side is true, even though the left-hand side is false, so myVar gets set to true. Again, the form down here has the exact same meaning as the versions we are looking up here that we're using the logical or assignment operators. And if you're ever confused when looking at the logical or assignment, just keep in mind this expanded form. It will also help you understand the short circuiting that we'll look at a little bit later. Now, one of the use cases of the logical or assignment operator is just being shorthand for going and writing logical expressions. So if I had something like this, for example, you can see that we're having to repeat myVar quite a lot throughout all of this. So if I go and I run this, it evaluates to true because the second expression here has evaluated to true. But it's very verbose because we're having to repeat myVar twice everywhere. I can instead go and rewrite this to use the logical or assignment operator and make everything a little bit more clean and concise. So I can go in here, just rewrite it with the logical or assignment. Again, this has the exact same meaning, but we're not having to repeat myVar. And again, we're going to get back true. Just a little bit of a more concise way of writing that. The way that I find myself using the logical or assignment operator most commonly, though, is for assigning default values. So let's take a look at that in action. I'm going to go and create an object here. So I'll say const obj, and I'm going to create an object with a single property, which is a title, which has just been set to an empty string. Now, let's say that at some point later in our code, we actually want to go and make sure that title has been set to a default string if no title has been provided. So if the title is an empty string, we want to go and set a default string so something is displayed in our UI. We could do this using an if statement, checking if title is equal to the empty string, but we can also use the logical or assignment operator to do this safely and avoid overwriting previously set titles. So I could just say obj.title, which is the value that we want to set, the logical or assignment operator, and then go and give the default title. So I'll say default title. You can see that the value for obj.title, so if I go and inspect the object, has now been correctly set to the default title. That on its own is not too interesting, but let's say that later in our code, we actually tried to set the default title to something different. So I could go in here and let's say we had some more code and we're wanting to try to set the default title again. But this time we're going to try to set the default to something different. So I'll say new default title. And you can see that when I run this, the value for title has not actually changed. So if I go and say obj here and inspect the object, the title has remained the same that we set up here. This is a nice feature of using the logical or assignment operator to set default values. The operator will only go and change the value if it is an empty string or other falsy type value, so something that would evaluate to false in JavaScript, like the empty string would. This is a little bit confusing, but again, we can make it a little bit more clear if we go and expand this. So let's go and instead of using the logical or assignment operator, we'd actually say obj, or the title is equal to the title or the new default title. Because of the somewhat interesting way that JavaScript's logical operators work, if the value over here on the left-hand side of the logical or operator goes and evaluates to anything that would be considered a true value, such as a non-empty string, that is the value that's going to be returned. So in this case, we go and return the object.title, which has already been set to the string default title here, instead of going and resetting it to the new title that we tried passing in up there. One of the most interesting properties of the logical or assignment operator is that it can short circuit. Now, this is a feature that it picks up from the normal logical or operator in JavaScript. And before going and looking at short circuiting with the assignment version of this, let's actually take a look and make sure we understand short circuiting with the normal logical or operator. So when you're writing a logical OR operator in JavaScript, you might have something like this. So we have a false on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, I have a function that I'm calling. In this case, I'm having a function that is just going to print something to the console. When I go and I run this, you can see that we have gotten back a result of undefined. That is because our function on the right-hand side is not actually returning anything. So the result of this entire expression is false. But we've also gone and printed the value here to the console. So that is looking good. Now, what happens if we go back here and instead of having false, we instead say true? You can see that we get back a value of true for the result of this expression because the left-hand side here is evaluating to true. But the interesting part is that the console log here has not been evaluated at all. So we don't go and see hi being printed to the console again. It's as if this code didn't exist. Now this is because JavaScript knows that when you have a logical OR operator, if the left-hand side evaluates to something that would be considered true, it doesn't need to look at the right-hand side at all. The right-hand side could be false, it could be true, it doesn't matter. What JavaScript decides to do is just skip evaluating that side entirely. So once it sees the true over here in this case, it will skip evaluating the console log over here, which is why we don't see anything else printed to the console. The logical OR assignment operator picks up the same short-circuiting ability. So let's go and take a look at that. So I've created a helper function here that is going to help us investigate how this short-circuiting is actually working. So the log and return function here, all it is going to do is call console log. It's going to log the number of times that the function itself has been called, and it's going to also log the value that has been passed to this function. And then the entire function just returns the value that was passed to it. So really all it's doing is logging and then returning the value that is passed to it. Down here, I've also created a variable called myVar, which is going to start as false. So let's go in here and use the logical OR assignment operator on myVar. So I say myVar and then the logical OR assignment operator here. And if I say log and return and pass in false, you can see that the function has been called once so far and the value returned by it was false, and myVar has remained false as well. Now if I go and pass in false again, you can see that the function has been called twice now, still returning false, myVar is still false. Now let's see if I pass in true here what happens. You can see that the function now has been called a third time, the value returned by it is true, and myVar has now gone to true, which is what we'd expect. Not very interesting so far, but now let's go and call it a fourth time. And you can see that myVar is being set to true, but there is no printing for the function being called here. And that is because the function is not being called. It is actually being short-circuited, and we are skipping the evaluation entirely. For this, it doesn't actually matter what value we're passing in on the right-hand side here. So we could have false here. What is happening is that JavaScript is seeing that the left-hand side here, myVar, has gone to true. It knows that because this is a logical OR assignment operator, it doesn't need to evaluate anything on the right-hand side. It can be false, it can be true. It is just going to skip evaluation of that entirely. So we just ignore that entire expression. It's as if that code did not exist at all. This short-circuiting might take you a little time to wrap your head around, but if you're ever confused about how this is actually working, just remember to go and expand the expression here. So we can instead write this as myVar equals myVar or log and return. And because we have the value of true over on the left-hand side of the OR operator here, the right-hand side doesn't need to be evaluated. So you can use this trick if you're ever confused about how the logical OR assignment operator is working. So that's the logical OR assignment operator in JavaScript. As we've seen, it can be convenient shorthand when writing expressions. You can use it to assign default values. And for more advanced uses, you can also take advantage of its short-circuiting behavior.